school systems in nations such as Pakistan with a colonial past have a double problem with identity. One of them deals with the residual structures and forms of knowledge which have been superimposed on the indigenous cultures, objectively aspects of power and normality both at the local and at the international levels. This may be understood in terms of the European colonial language English in the case of Pakistan, which became the official language of the government, of the elite, and a medium of instruction in schools. The second problem of identity deals with the use of schools to help forge a national identity as it interplays with the colonial and post colonial influences with much older and deeper rooted traditions of culture and religion. It was not until my first visit to my husband's village that I realized the plight and oppression of women and girls in terms of health, nutrition, basic amenities of life, and education. Whenever I visited my family, we would spend a day at the village sitting and talking to our relatives and friends. They mentioned about their struggles and hardships in family life, their status in the society, and cultural norms that bound them to one place, the house or the farmlands, in order to provide for their children. I went back to Pakistan this summer and had the opportunity to be among the villagers and feel their plight, hunger, severity of weather conditions, and facing survival. Women were supervised by men in the farmland so that they do their jobs correctly. Fatehpur Elementary Middle School, located in the central part of Pakistan where I worked for a few weeks, was the only public school in the village providing education for 400 girls, whose parents opted to send their daughters to school from kindergarten through 8th grade. The elementary school was opened in 1979 as one room with leaves as roof. Even though the roof is now made of cement, the students from kindergarten through 3rd grade still sit on the ground and are attended by one teacher. The middle grades were added in 1987 with a proper building for the school in 2000 due to the efforts of the principal who is still working hard to obtain a high school for her students. These 400 girls were only one third of the girl population in the village. There was no school after 8th grade for girls' education in the village unless girls wanted to travel a distance of 7 miles to another city for school. These 7 miles are not comparable to traveling on a freeway in an SUV. The terrain and roads are broken, making it difficult for cars and motorcycles to cover the distance in more than 30 minutes. Hardly any of the girls were able to go to that school because their parents did not have readily available transportation. Or even if they did, they had other important things to do than drive their daughters to and from the school and spend more than 1 hour on it. The only transportation available was public, which was described as unsafe by the girls in the village. Their honor, modesty, and dignity would be affected if they traveled in a public bus full of men staring and sometimes touching them at inappropriate places. When asked about the school facilities and increasing girls' enrollment, the city council president stated that this has been on our list since the past few years, but there's nothing we can do about it. It is a great honor that we are facilitating 400 girls with 7 teachers in a 7-room school. Imagine if we could enroll all the girls. The government does not provide us with the resources to deal with the girls' population going to school. Nevertheless, he agreed that the girls' education was a vital part in the progress of the country. However, nobody in the government would be willing to provide a high school or the resources to attend to the needs of the girls in the village. He stated that this village has outdated its surrounding villages by offering girls a place to study by cleaning up a junkyard and providing a structure of roof, walls, and pillars for the school. The parliament representative was asked about girls' education, and his response was that I cannot convince or stop parents from making their girls work in the fields. Even if schooling becomes mandatory in Pakistan, these cultural bindings and conditions will not change because whether we accept it or not, there's poverty, and unless we address that, we cannot resolve anything. He also mentioned that the curriculum is the same for rural and urban students. Some of our students in the villages have not even seen a lamp. Reading and learning about it is unimaginable for them. Unless we do something about it, our education will not become better. Mentioning his own children, he was proud to say that they went to elite schools in Pakistan, and some of them are now preparing to go abroad for higher education. The local religious leader was contacted and consulted about girls' education. He related that he has about 150 to 200 students coming to his mosque every day, half of whom are girls who do not attend school. Even though he said the schools were important, he also said at another point that providing girls with religious knowledge was enough to make them great citizens and married partners. When asked if he has ever talked about women's rights in Islam in any of his Friday prayer sermons, he replied in the negative, stating This is a village that has its own culture. Men will remain men and women as women, implying that women's rights in Islam has no implications for them in the village. On my way to the school was a cotton field where women were working. When asked why men can't do these farmland jobs, I was told in frustration, men do not have hands and feet. Another answered in astonishment, men do these jobs, implying picking berries, cotton, or weeding the vast acres of land barefoot under scorching heat with no place to rest under the shade of a tree, with only a tube well far, far away to quench their thirst. Small children were left swinging in cloth swings tied to a handmade rope bed under the shade of a tree, far away so that they do not bother their mother's work. These women were paid 50 cents for picking 2 pounds of berries, sometimes collecting only $7 to $10 a day, resulting in hands being numb, cracked, cut, dry, rough, and tired. There were young girls working with their mothers and grandmothers who had a deep interest in school and books, but were forced to work due to the poor conditions of the family and survival. Even though public schools are now free of cost for those who attended with a stipend for children above 5th grade, parents still feel it is safe for their girls to work in the farmlands, learn Quran, stitching, and cooking at home and be ready for marriage at the age of 15. While heading back from school one day, I saw some women and girls making bundles of tobacco by the side of the river. I thought to ask them about the education of their daughters. If the poor do not have money to spend on their daily necessities, how can we make our girls study? We work to fill the stomachs of our families. Everything is so expensive, but in return, we are given so less for what we work. When I mentioned about free books and stipend provided to girls from 5th grade onwards, they said, our girls went there but were not given anything. They did not have the resources, nor did they give any attention to our girls' work, character building, and studies. Teachers work less and are on vacation more. The teachers say even if you don't come once a week, at least come on the days that district officers are there to inspect the school. If there's anyone in our neighborhood who teach our girls sewing and embroidery, we send them there to learn.
तवज्जो नहीं मिलती तो इसलिए नहीं भेजते आप लोग बच्चियों को स्कूल।
और क्या करें, क्या नाम है, पढ़ाती थोड़ी है, छुट्टियां ज्यादा करती हैं। छुट्टियां ज्यादा करें अभी भी। वो कहती है कि भाई तुम चाहे हफ्ते में एक दफा आ जाओ, बस उस दिन आ जाया करो जिस दिन अफसर भले फिर अब क्या करें, अब गरीब आदमी नु सोचते चलो काम